Hey folks, my name's Kevin and it's time for a little bit more knife nerdery, and I am so freaking excited about this one. I'm dangerously excited. I'm honestly quite nervous because what's in this box is an absolute grail of mine. I can't believe I finally have my hands on one of them. I'm going to ramble for just a little bit, so if you want to skip ahead to the point where you can finally see the knife, don't leave a comment below, just use the thumb. There will be a timestamp. Anyway, yeah. So backing up a little bit, way back in the day, whoops, ooh, almost dropped that. Way back in the day, this is what was a grail of mine. You know, this was when at the point when I thought, how could anyone spend $150, $200 on a knife? This is what I always wanted. I love the idea of a sheep's foot blade. I love the shape of this, to be able to put your finger on it. And I just, yeah, I really, really wanted one of these, and eventually I talked myself into getting one of them. And it didn't take long for me to escalate from here. Once I realized how spending money on quality and design can get you better results, I just kind of fell deeper and deeper into the hobby. And so, yeah, we're going to keep this out for a bit later, just because this is relevant in terms of the blade shape and everything too. But as we went along, about a year ago for my birthday, I absolutely splurged and bought myself this. This is a neon light. The original version is actually called the light version, which is weird, from Shirogorov. And this is so amazing. And this was going to be my birthday splurge for myself. But 3 days later, literally, I managed to find this, which is the R20 version. This is based on the Neon Zero, which is the updated version with like the slightly different everything. But I didn't intend to keep both. I intended to keep whichever one I liked more and sell the other one, but I haven't been able to let go of them yet. And these were, at the time, like my big Grail splurges. I really went all out and spent more than I should have, but I got something that just was so freaking cool in all the different ways I wanted. And eventually, I talked myself into this. And this is what the time was definitely... This was still, up until today, this was the most money I'd ever spent on a knife. And that makes sense. These things are ridiculously expensive. And I got this one at table through one of the lottos. And I adore everything about this, mechanically, visually, aesthetically, and functionally. This is such a freaking good knife, but I had always wanted a nude version. So while I absolutely adore the vivid, vibrant color on this, and the fact, and it works way better in person than on camera, but the fact that this is secret blurple, that is so cool. But I don't like feeling like I'm going to scratch knives, so I tend to go for easier finishes. So I recently finally got this. And honestly, this is what I would definitely consider a Grail knife for me, because it's something that was out of reach. It was really hard to get because of availability. They didn't do many of these nude versions. This one in particular is in the S90V, which is cool. I like that because it's a more me steel than an M390 for the type of thing I'm going to do with this knife, but that also just increases the rarity of it, but that's not the whole deal. But it's very expensive. It's hard to get. It took me a really long time to find one. So that kind of hunt aspect of the Grail. Yeah, this is absolutely a Grail for me. But the thing that we're unboxing today, which you'll already know what it is from seeing the thumbnail, is the thing that was always a step even further out of reach. Because while these are exorbitantly expensive, and together they add up to the cost of what's in that box, these are still production-y knives, and they're easier to come by. So what we're getting at today is just bonkers territory. But again, my birthday's coming up, and I don't know how I am doing the mental gymnastics to justify this to myself, but who cares? I ended up finding one in like new condition in the exact kind of spec that I wanted, and I just went for it. So let's open this up. Let's use this guy, my original Grail, to get in here. And I'm scared. I'm scared because, yeah, like I said, this knife costs as much as those two haptics combined, and that is an absolutely insane statement to be able to make. Ooh, I missed the tape on this side. Whoops. I'm still missing some tape. Are you kidding me? What am I missing? Oh, it's like glue. This box is giving me trouble. Okay, I'm just fast forward through all this stuff. That has my address on it, so I'm glad I didn't show that. Okay. You might recognize this little signature. That is Peter Rassenti's logo. And he does this thing where he doesn't include COAs or anything. He just includes these boxes. Silica gel packet. Oh. Oh, yeah. 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 Wow. Okay. How's the detent? Nice and good. Let's flick this thing open. Oh my God. Oh my God. So this, this is a Peter Rassenti custom Paysan 2.0 integral knife, handmade up in Canada by Peter Rassenti. And this is one of the most me knives that I think has ever existed. And I love the way it feels in my hand. Oh, that's perfect for me. Oh my God. Okay. Oh my gosh, I love it. Ah! Okay, so, okay. Whew. So what do we got going on here? The Paysan is a design by Peter Rassenti. He is a custom knife maker from Canada. I just said that. He is well known for making integral knives. He's not like the founder of it, but he made his name kind of on these integral knives. And what that means is this whole handle here is machined from a single piece of titanium. It is cut out internally and everything like that to the point where there is no additional pieces and there's no seams. Everything is just this one thing. And that is extremely hard to do. It's pretty darn rare, and it requires you to get everything perfectly in your single go because there's nothing, you can't swap out anything. So if you mess up anything, you have to scrap the whole thing. And so doing that at all is really, really hard. Doing it well is even harder, and doing it flawlessly is where you get into the fact that this is an absurdly expensive knife. And because he just does these absolutely flawlessly. Okay, I hit it with my hand. Oh. So, what do we got going on here? This is an XHP blade steel. He has done these in CPM 154 before. I did see some of his, I think, Nirvanas done in S90V early on, but I would love to get an S90V version of that. I just said that over here, but you know, I'm totally happy with XHP. I love that as a steel. I even love when CPM 154 is a steel. They're pretty darn comparable to each other. And so to me, this is just a really great general purpose EDC blade steel. Oh, I love that. This is done in a stone wash finish all across the board, which is what makes this so a me knife. It's not this shiny, glorious, beautiful version. It is the kind of just like everything about this is designed to be practical and purposeful and user-based. This is a 3 1/4 inch blade length, which is not 3 1/4, 3 1/8 inch, exactly in my sweet spot. I love 3 to 3 1/4 inch knives, and this is exactly in the middle. And so this is the perfect size and shape for me. Let's look at this hollow grind. Can I get that to focus? Yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's beautiful. That hollow is just so nicely done. And you look at the way that this sharpening choil-esque thing, this comes up so high and the plunge ends right there. And so you have this entire space. It gets so thin behind the edge. Oh, I love it. This is the version that I wanted the most. He does a couple of different milling patterns that he's done across the board on his knives for a while. He either has a completely plain handle, he'll have 3 horizontal stripes, he'll do a segment of stripes here and here that go this way and that way off the side, and he has this. And I don't think he has names for any of these. I've never seen an official like taxonomy of his handle patterns. And so I don't know what you call this other than just like holes, but it's my favorite of them all visually. I'm not normally someone who goes for holes in handles. I don't typically like the concept of speed holes, but something about this just perfectly tickles my brain. And the irony is that these are probably more speed holes than your average speed holes, because these are, I assume, a reference to the kind of hole handle pattern, not handle, hole strap pattern you'll find on old vintage racing watch straps from that kind of that era of like beefy, muscular racing, Formula One, not Formula One, whatever. I think I'm totally blanking what I'm trying to say there. But those handle patterns, those watch straps typically look like that, and they're usually done straight on. So this one having an additional row like this and being at an angle means it could just be a coincidence, but I do kind of assume that that's what there's a visual reference to, but I actually really love it. And the other thing is that the version, I like the striped version, but the other version that looks, I think, the coolest to me is the version that has angles coming down. And I find that one, while it looks cool, I just don't think it'd be anywhere near as comfortable in the hand, in part because I've handled this. Now, this is still on loan to me. This is from Marco, aka Knives of the Round Table. Shout out to Marco, great channel. He's another engineer that just really has a good eye for knives. Go check out his videos; they're great. He lent me this knife, and one of the reasons why I haven't gotten this back to him yet is because I knew that this was coming. This is a custom knife factory version of the SNAFU 3.0. And like here, what that 3.0 and 2.0, what those numbering is the different versions of his knife. They do involve some smaller geometry changes, definitely some cosmetic changes, but for the most part, what's different between his different iterations is the size. So the bigger version of this is the 2.0, and they came down to a smaller blade length here in the 3.0. And similarly, the original Paysan is in a larger full-size size, and so this smaller version is what you would consider, the 2.0 is what you consider like a small Paysan, or sometimes they call it, people see it listed as like a mini Paysan. But like I said, he carries over that same handle patterns even on these production versions from CKF, and I know that CKF has gotten some criticism for their implementations of custom knives, like the 520 having sharper corners than the actual customs. And so it's possible that this handle is less comfortable to me because of the fact that it is a CKF version. But if you just look at the way that this design works, the way that these kind of things cut in, and you compare it to the versions you'll find on his originals, I think it's going to be the exact same thing, where it's going to give you spectacular traction, but I just kind of hate the way it feels in hand. It's just pokey everywhere. And so I kind of assume that you would find that on this as well. It's funny that this has always been such a, like, the be-all end-all Grail knife for me, because some of his other designs, like the SNAFU and the Satori, are just absolutely not at all me knives. I think this is a spectacularly designed knife in a lot of ways, but aesthetically, it's just way, way, way too tactical for me. And so something like this is so much more up my alley. This is, by the way, also an integral, and they did an excellent job on that. You'll see what's going on there. You'll see that this just kind of falls closed guillotine, and that you'll see that this one absolutely does not. This has very little friction to close. I'm so pleased to see that too. And that comes from the lock bar tuning, because the lock bar over here is very, very light. This is a very light lock bar, and that is by far the number one thing that's going to contribute to a knife falling closed. Obviously, this very thick blade stock, I think this is 0.18 even, I might be wrong about that. The thick blade stock and having beefiness up at the tip is going to make gravity pull down on this, but it has to be pulling against the lock bar tension strength here, causing the friction. And so this is tuned in a way where those two things combine to make it free fall. This is 0.18 0.13 inch blade stock, I think. I haven't measured it myself, but that's what I think I've seen it listed at before. And so it's got nowhere near as much beefiness up here. It's nowhere near as long of a blade. And this lock bar is just not designed to be super duper lightweight. And so as a result, you just have more friction here. But if you're honestly, that's part of what makes this such a me knife again. I find these types of closing actions to be tremendously fun, but this is the more me closing action where you don't have to worry about it guillotining your finger off. I like keeping my fingers in place, but that very mild amount of any kind of attempt to close it makes it go home immediately. So that is just perfect for me. Oh man, this blade shape is just my favorite. I love it. I love it to death. I absolutely love the way this looks. We do have, what we have right here is a slight upsweep, providing a mild thumb ramp with jimping on it. And then we have this big swoop down curve here. And that's for putting your finger on in this kind of pinch grip for utility cuts. I love that combination. That's part of the reason why this was a Grail to begin with. We have the slightly upsweeping blade right here so that it's basically flat across and you have a very low down tip, but you do have the ability to make contact with the surface. Do I have any flat surface? I'll just use this. You do have the ability to make contact with the edge all the way back to here. You can use the entire thing. On a true flat-edged sheep's foot or Wharncliffe type knife, you can't really make contact with that unless it happens to drop below this handle point, and you end up having to just use the tip. And so part of the other thing that makes this such a me design is the fact that this blade is down here coming below this handle part right there, which means you can actually get the back of this onto a surface. It's just so well designed for actual use. Anyway, so like I said, over here we've got the same kind of thing. We have an upsweep part right here with the jimping to lock your finger into. We have this down part here, and we have a low down tip. And I just love this. I have this in a bunch of different knives. This is the Olamic Busker, and again, we have an kind of upswept thumb rampy spot right there. We have this swoop down for you to put your finger on, and then a curve down to the bottom. And recently I picked up this Picaroon Tools Mutineer, and it's funny because, like, honestly, part of the reason why I bought this is because it has so much in common with this. And this is just something I adore. And so when I saw this, I immediately went like, oh my God, that's like so much in common. I have so many elements that I just absolutely love. This is a spectacularly designed knife for the kinds of just practical utilitarian cutting that I want. And I love this. But I very quickly then realized I was going to be able to get this. And that's why I'm going to be moving this on. I've already agreed to sell it to someone. Because like I just can't justify keeping this when I just bought this. They're just this. When will I grab this if I have this in my pocket or is available for me to put in my pocket? Let me think of another version of this that I've seen. We've got the same thing going on here on the McBee. You've got a spot for you to put your thumb, and then you've got this pot for you to rest your finger. And I just adore this shape. It is so incredibly useful. Enough so that I actually bought a fixed blade with very, very similar dimensions to this. I'm not much of a fixed blade person, but I definitely will have use for it out in my yard and stuff like that. And I ended up getting this. This is the BMKT Field Spec. And yeah, look at that. I don't think there's any ambiguity about these blade shapes. These are tremendously similar blade shapes. That overall profile is exceptionally similar. And it's just because it works so dang freaking well, so dang good to rest your finger right there, have all of this meat right here, and be able to use that tip, some jimping back here to put your thumb on when you're in this regular grip. I just adore it. This kind of like skinnier handle, bigger blade, part of what that's doing for you is giving you the ability to get your fingers out of the way out here and make it easier to get to the surface. And you got the same thing going on here. Like, look how much further this comes up. You can hold it right there and it just gets your fingers completely out of the way. And if you choke up a little bit and put your finger right up in this spot, that feels super comfortable too. I don't think I would ever use it like this. I don't think you would be intended to, and I guess theoretically you could. One of the things I was worried about is this jimping. I didn't know if it would be too aggressive. The version that you find on, for example, the Nirvana 4.0, which is the smallest Nirvana, that one is, or maybe the 3.0, I get them mixed up. That one has too aggressive of jimping, and it just looks like it would hurt. And I'm so pleased to see that this is not. This is really, really well done. It's aggressive enough jimping that it really locks you in, but it doesn't hurt to press on. What we've got going on here is nice crisp edges, but they're not so far apart and they're not deep enough that you can't really push it deep into your fingers. So this just doesn't hurt to press on. I love the way that feels. It's aggressive enough that I think it will work in something like a gloved type situation, but just with my regular hand, this still feels very nice. And if you want, you can choke up even further and put your thumb in this spot if you're going to be trying to push through kind of stuff like that, but want a lot of force behind it, and that's going to really work nice. Oh, okay, there's so many things I want to talk about. One of the reasons what makes this so a me knife and why I went for this version compared to any of the other versions is because I love to reverse flick a knife. And so this is a version of a Benchmade knife where they have licensed the Spyderco hole. This is also a licensed Spyderco hole. Rassenti has worked with Spyderco, and there's a production version of the Paysan that is huge though. It's just way too big for me in my hands. It's 3.88 inches, and it's such a hard to find knife that even those go for a tremendous amount of money. So that is also an integral, by the way. Let's talk about that for a moment. But before I get there, I just want to say like the part of what makes this so good is the positioning of the spider hole. It's just right there, right where you curl your finger in, right? I love it. It works so well. How does it work for, yeah. Oh, I love everything about this. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about something that makes this interesting in terms of how it's being done. And this is one of the things that I find fascinating about the way Rassenti does his integrals. So on a typical integral knife, you have a stop pin of some kind. Let's look literally at any of these that have stop pins. So it's either going to be like an internal stop pin. You'll see the stop pin right there, and it travels through a smile-shaped arc in the handle, or you'll have a more traditional stop pin like you'll have right here, and that's a big beefy stop pin that the blade hits into. And on something like this, you have to do something a little bit different, because on integral knives, you can't do what these knives are doing because you can't take apart the handle scales. So you can't just insert a dowel pin between there easily. And so on some integral knives, you'll see that they'll have a different way of getting at that. They'll have a different hole somewhere. You'll find like a screw, another screw that's showing up on the outside surface where they have put it in and it just shows up as a screw right there. Or you'll find something like, so this is the Wee Eidolon, a Justin Lundquist design, and this is an integral knife. And so the way that they're doing this has a internal stop pin, but the kind that stays fixed in position and travels through a smile-shaped arc in the blade. And so there's a stop pin right there, and the blade travels around it. And that stop pin, the way they're able to get this in, since they can't pry this apart and put it in, they're putting it in from the side right here. It's right there, and the thing that's holding it in place and preventing it from falling out is this pivot collar right here. So if you take this out and then pry out the actual collar, you will get access to that stop pin, and it's just being held in place. And that's the same thing you'll find on, for example, Isotope. The Vero Isotope. That's the integral version, right? Anyway, you'll find things like these oversized or oddly shaped pivot collars, because what that pivot collar is doing is holding in that stop pin. The other way of doing it on an integral knife is by making them external. I was using these as thumb studs, and they work fine for that. It doesn't work great for that, because part of what's going on here is that this is in fact a stop pin in both the open and closed position. You'll see that it is making direct contact with the handle there, and there's a little tiny get it to shine, mark right there where it makes contact, and also make contact in the open position. And this is a common way of handling this on integral knives, because rather than trying to fit it somewhere in here, you just move the stop pin onto the blade itself and let it be external. But I don't love this because of the fact that it's touching here means that you don't have good access. You have to push from below. It happens to work on this knife because of the overall design of it. But anyway, it's not my favorite design. And so what we're doing over here is something odd. What we have is a stop pin right there. It's hiding in there. But how is it being held in? Where is that coming from? If we open this up and look down in there, it's right there. But how are they getting it in? And the key is to try and look right here. Ah, oh, there it is. Do you see it yet? This is part of what makes this guy such a master. It is invisible, but I can see it. Okay, let's look at where this is. It's right there. Do you follow it out? There. That is the stop pin. Can you kind of see the edge right there? So these stop pins are placed in through the side, press fit into place, wedged in, and then finished so perfectly that it is absolutely, utterly seamless. And then with the stonewash finish, it just becomes absolutely invisible. It's just, you'll never see it. It's so crazy. And if you look at the version that Spyderco does, it's implemented the same way, but it's so much more obvious where the pin is because they don't do this kind of perfectly seamless finishing on it, and they don't do this kind of stonewash. So this implementation here is just flawless. It's so cool, to the point where for the longest time when I was hunting after these knives, I honestly didn't even realize that they had an internal stop pin, because if you look, you just don't see it anywhere. Oh, that's so freaking cool. This has a zirconium pivot and pivot collar. That's one of my favorite kinds of a little bit of sneaky fanciness on a knife. I'm not into the super colorful Damascus and Zircuti and stuff like that. I think it looks really, really cool. And I think they did a great job of it over here at CKF, but it's just not the most me thing in the world. I also will say that I personally think this color scheme, which CKF has done in a couple other places, and that you can find on like the Satori's as well, of colorful here and bronze here. I think it looks weird, but whatever. But a lot of people will go, hey, if I'm going to try and make a knife fancier, let's put Zircuti around or something like that. And I personally just don't want that color. So to me, if you're going to add a little bit of fanciness to a knife and do it through materials, I think it's really fun to put Zirc on there, just plain Zirc. And this zirconium has been heat treated to the form that forms that zirconium oxide layer on the outside. And so, yeah, if you heat up zirconium hot enough, it will naturally form a layer of zirconium oxide. It will oxidize on the outside and create this incredibly hard to scratch dark black surface. If you do scratch underneath this, you have raw zirconium, and zirconium kind of just looks like titanium in terms of color. It's a gray metal. And so to me, this is the way that you get like subtle accenting in a way that is still very, very user-friendly, very, very functional. And I love it. I love it. I love it. Love it. This is a dual keyed pivot. This is one of the few things about this knife that is not like completely my perfect spec, because I would prefer if there was some kind of trickery going in to make this be a captive. But at least this is large hardware that looks like a T10. That might even be a T50. I think that's a T10. And it is really nice deep engagement, so it will be easy, especially with a stubby driver, to hold this in place. I still would prefer if it weren't done that way, but you know, even when you pay this much money for a knife, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. The other aspect about this that isn't the absolute most me thing in the world is this clip, because this is certainly not a deep carry clip. But again, it's a very functional clip. It works well. It has good retention. It's got a little bit light on the clearance, but this will work perfectly for the kind of pants that I actually wear. And yeah, I would love if he came up with a version of this clip that had just even less. Like if he made a version that, for example, only needed the single screw here because it also had like a pin and was inset or something like that. I don't know. You could probably get away with this being even less, and I would certainly prefer that. But if you're going to have a knife hanging out of your pocket, it's so cool that it is, if it's something this like, you know, worthy of braggery. The other thing that I would say that makes this not a perfect me knife is the fact that there is no like steel lock bar insert. Now, these knives are known to have a little bit of lock stick when they come, but this one, while it was like in like new condition, the one thing the guy said he did was flick it enough times to break that in. So there's absolutely no lock stick on this right now. And this is a carbidized lock face, so I'm not worried about it longevity wise, but you know, I just do love seeing a lock bar insert, but that's again the kind of thing that's really hard to do on an integral knife because you can't get to the inside to mill out the space. And so what you'll often find if they do put in a lock bar insert, they'll do something like this, where you'll have it coming from the outside. And so honestly, it's a trade-off that I would prefer to have this, because if you're while this is fine, it just adds more business to the outside of the knife in a way that I don't love. I like it when the outside of the knife is much more clean like that. And so since they can't do that easily, and since I see nothing wrong with a carbidized lock face, I think that this is a perfectly good way of doing it. One of the side effects of not having a steel lock bar insert is that you can't use that steel lock bar insert to double as an over travel stop. An over travel stop is something that physically prevents you from pushing the lock bar out too far and accidentally overspringing this leaf spring right here. On a knife like this, that is exactly where this clip comes in, because this clip placement is very intentional. On a frame lock knife, you generally speaking don't want to have the clip entirely over the lock bar, because then it will be pushing down and providing tension against this lock bar that's going to make it harder to open up. It's normal practice to try and move that over so at least be partially or entirely over the frame. Now on this knife though, it's very purposeful that it is mostly over the lock bar, because this is your over travel stop. Now, if I push awkwardly in this way where I'm not applying any tension right here, there's going to be a point where eventually the lock bar hits that clip. And at that point, anything past that would have both the tension of the lock bar itself and the tension of the clip preventing it from moving out forward. So that alone would be sufficient to prevent you from bending this out in any kind of normal circumstance. But you're never going to be doing this weird, awkward thing I'm talking about right there. In practice, you're going to have your hand wrapped around the knife. Your fingers are going to be curled down and holding it in like this as you're trying to push this over and pressing downward. And so this absolutely acts as an over travel stop. You can see it just tapping right there. And so you can still totally grip this knife and just let it fall to your nail like that. It is very effective. While we're looking at this clip is a tappy clip. And what that means is that it doesn't sit directly on the frame. There's a tiny gap. I've seen that mentioned in a lot of reviews of Rassenti's customs, and so I think that's a pretty common thing. If that bugs you, it doesn't really matter to me, but if it bugs you, you could take this clip off and bend it down ever so slightly so that it's making permanent contact, but I don't think I personally care. Now, the next thing I want to show you back here is that, because I absolutely adore this. That is the maker's mark, and that's where it is placed. The rest of this knife is completely sterile, and I just love it. I also love when makers put stuff on the inside of the knife, but that's something you can't really do on an integral because there's no way to engrave on these inner surfaces, and so this is such a good placement. It just makes it feel like an Easter egg and keeps the rest of the knife classy. You will see that Brian Brown does the exact same thing with his placement, and I love that too. I think I read somewhere that he said that's an homage to this, but it could just be that they both came up with the idea on their own. Now, that's one of the few things that actually really bugs me about the CKF version, because not only do they add an additional logo, but they put their logos out here. There is Peter Rassenti's logo and there's theirs. And that right there, why is that not symmetric? Why is this one above instead of at the front? And why is this one in the front instead of above? I get that this kind of looks nice here at the slope because it's a forward sloping thing, but I hate that it's there at all. And I hate that it is asymmetric. It just bugs me. And especially at the size that they're rendering these, they could have absolutely put them both there side by side underneath the clip, and it would have just been better. Anyway, let's get back to talking about this guy. Another thing that you'll see that's interesting about this is that this detent ball is placed really, really far in and really, really close up. And so this has enough lock bar strength that it still has a firm detent. But what we're doing there is by having a very, very low lever arm distance. And so that's part of how they're achieving this like relatively light amount of friction coming down, because the friction is being placed at a position so close to the pivot and the center of gravity of this is so far away that the torque situation means that this is just way, way easier to overcome that. You'll get an even free fallier knife if you move this detent ball super far away and have light lock bar pressure as a result. But this, having it super, super, super tight in and right underneath it, is one of the ways that people get around that in the other direction. I am looking at the clock and I actually have something I need to do pretty soon. And I have been rambling about this for over 30 minutes, but I just want to keep talking about it. I just absolutely love it. I love the way it feels in my hand. I love the way it feels in my hand when I choke up even a little bit and put my finger right there. I'm so freaking excited about it. Yes. Okay. Deep breaths, Kevin. Deep breaths. This is so freaking cool. I love it. 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 Thank you guys for watching. I don't really know how much more I will do on this knife because I've talked about this so much that this is kind of a small details review. I will maybe talk about how to disassemble this. It's supposed to be pretty easy to do. It's because of the fact that the stop pin is right there and you don't have to worry about it being inside the blade or anything like that. You don't have to take it out. You can just take this out and just pull. But yeah. You'll definitely see this again on my channel just because I'm so freaking happy to have it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching and I'll catch you guys next time. And yeah, I'm so excited. Okay, bye.